What's happening, guys? Welcome in another boxing breakdown and prediction show for this weekend's hugely anticipated trilogy clash, between, an absolute first ballot Hall of Famer in Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, against the man who officially at least beat him early last year to become, the man at super flyweight, Juan Estrada. So let's get into it now. Chocolatito comes into this one as the fairly sizable minus 225 favourite here, with Estrada coming back at around a plus 175. And, that's a pretty seismic level shift from the odds on offer before last year's fight, where El Gallo actually went in as the slight favourite ahead of that one. And, look, the reason's pretty clear. Chocolatito has shown he's still at the top of his craft in boxing. Absolutely dissected a current champion in Julio Cesar Martinez earlier this year over in Texas, while, we just can't say the same about Estrada, who looks to have seen like a noticeable dip off in performances over recent fights, especially that last one against RG Cortez as well. In my opinion, in terms of the whole Chocolatito thing, it's actually about time the books caught up to how good he's been over the last few years, notably since that second Rung Visay loss, the one he got KO'd in. I think the boxing world effectively wrote off Chocolatito after that KO destruction at the hands of Rung Visay. And while that was obviously expected, I personally didn't think it would be by, to such a degree. Chocolatito was pound for pound number one. He was the media darling. And suddenly went from that to, most of the public, he simply moved up too far. He's kind of finished at this weight, and let's move on to the next guy kind of thing. So, Chocolatito took some time off after that defeat. About a year, I believe, obviously was working on his game. And, the boxing public at large seemed to have forgotten about him. And to highlight that fact, I was in Vegas back in 2020, previewing his fight against Calify for WagerTalk. It was seen by the zone as a kind of passing of the torch kind of fight. Chocolatito went into that one as the underdog. It's crazy to think that now, but I believe the video was still up on WagerTalk as well, where, I was saying in the breakdown for that fight that if Gonzalez was even back to 70% of his best, Calify simply never been in there with a guy anywhere near as complete as Chocolatito is. Israel Gonzalez was probably his best win up to that point, and he arguably lost that fight as well. So I was all over Chocolatito in that fight. Actually suggested not only the straight underdog price, but that Chocolatito would get the stoppage between rounds 10 and 12 at plus 1,600. Chocolatito ends up stopping him in the ninth round. So we were just about a minute shy of that cash and that ticket. But, again, against Estrada in that second fight last year, underdog against Julio Cesar Martinez earlier this year also, he was a very, very marginal favourite. I think it was about minus 115, minus 120. So it's like every fight seems to be lined up with the age of the age 35 now as a passing the torch type of event for him. And he keeps on delivering. He keeps on setting that time clock back. So, it's almost a shame this gravy train is coming to a close here, because just backing, Roman Gonzalez over the last few years has been straight money. But as I say, finally the book seemed to have caught up to that fact, that he's still an elite level operator. And while he's not necessarily back to his heyday, kind of just like Floyd Mayweather managed to do, he's offset that like little bit of decline in reflex and so on by actually adding things to his game, especially on defense, they didn't have before. So he faced a fighter in Juan Estrada this weekend that, unlike Chocolatito, doesn't seem to have added a whole pile to his game from his prime years. And because of that, we saw Carlos Cuadras, clip him, hurt him hard. He went down in that fight back in 2020. And, just personally as well, I thought Chocolatito was lighting him up for a large part in that rematch last year as well. I didn't get the scorecards in that fight at all. That whole beef that the judge had with Nicaragua's leader, Daniel Ortega, I mean, just keep that stuff out of boxing. Punishing Chocolatito because you're not a fan of his country's president, I mean, only in boxing. But that aside, and probably most alarmingly, if you're an Estrada fan, was that fight against a relatively untested RG Cortez a couple of months ago as well. Cortez was absolutely lighting up Estrada for large portions in that fight. So, When both of these guys were at their best, it is a competitive fight. It was a competitive fight when they first met. But even at that, these two guys simply aren't on the same level. They really never have been. And I know that sounds harsh on Estrada. He is a great fighter. There's no doubt about that, and I'm not saying otherwise. But Chocolatito is he's different gravy. He's ATG level. Canis don't roll out the red carpet. He gets a White House invitation, kind of great. And, despite actually being the older of the two fighters heading into this one, Estrada simply looks the far more kind of shop-born of the two at this point as well. So, it has been an engaging trilogy, no question. I thought both of the previous two fights were won by Chocolatito, however, by fairly convincing margins as well. Didn't think either fight was that particularly hard to score. And with the trajectory, both guys have been on over the last 18 months as well. Chocolatito continuing to look good, continuing to hone his craft, adding wrinkles to his game defensively. While, on the other side, Estrada, yes, he's still a great fighter, but he fights like it's 2017, 2016. He's way too eager to engage in those needless firefights. So I just don't see anything other than a Chocolatito victory here on Saturday. And to be honest, I'm not even comfortable taking him on points either. While I think that's obviously the most likely scenario here, Roman Gonzalez via decision, Estrada's just way too easy to hit at this point, and similar to what Marquez did against Pacquiao, for example, all those years ago. Maybe Chocolatito wants to put an exclamation mark on this trilogy, leave no doubt about who the better fighter is here, because obviously officially it's 1-1. So he wants to make a statement, put this trilogy to bed. So I'm going to lay the lumber here at Roman Gonzalez on Saturday at -225. As I said, it's a shame the books have finally caught up to how good he's been over the last few years. But just in terms of this fight, I would say, look, if you want to play it cautious, back the Chocolatito to win by decision, prop it around even money here, as that is the most likely scenario. Estrada's a tough guy, but as I said, for me, I'm just going to take him straight up -225 here to get the outright win on Saturday. As honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a late stoppage just through an accumulation of punishment in this one either. So I've got 4 plays up in boxing for this weekend, including a massive +800 prop play as well. I really like for Friday's card over in the UK. So head on over to WagerTalk for those. Those plays aren't up for individual sale. Got to pick up a 1-day or 3-day all access pass to get access to those. But that'll do it from me anyway. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below on this fight. And you can catch me over at Twitter at the SportsWolf83 and also at my handicapper page, Kevin Dolan, over at WagerTalk as well. So as always, until next time, thanks for listening. Slán all ya.